If you'll permit me, I have a story to tell you after this. Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, and today we're going to tell you a little story about someone that I met, and it has to do with a show that is my favorite in the next generation. I was talking about it in the forums with fellow nerd Anon again, and he said this would be a good idea for a video. So thank you, Anon, again. I have pulled out my copy of this script. This is The Inner Light. This is the writer's draft that was filed in March of 1992, written by Morgan Gendel. And I had the pleasure of meeting Morgan Gendel at a Comic-Con some years ago, and he was at a table by himself and selling scripts and a comic book that he had written a sequel to this story in. There was no one around. It was my favorite story, and so I went and I said, how much for one of the scripts? And he told me, and I said, this is absolutely my favorite. And he said, well, there's nobody else around. I could tell you a few things. And so we had a rather elongated conversation at a table in the middle of the vendors area at a Comic-Con. And what was interesting was how the script became what it was. In fact, in reading this, with the exception of a few very little details, there weren't just a whole lot of rewrites done on it. Now, if you remember the plot of The Inner Light, Picard is on the bridge and they're on their way to some kind of shore leave for the whole ship, and they encounter this probe that has markings on it that are not familiar to anything in the Federation. It has a signal that also is not anything familiar in the Federation, and it starts scanning. And they find that it's not scanning anything, not sending anything back. They can tell it's unmanned, and it's just recording that. And so they find that kind of odd, and then it touches Picard, and Picard passes out. Now, the beam is still going between him and this probe, and they don't dare move him off the bridge because they're afraid breaking the beam might kill him. And over the course of really not a very long time, he spends a lifetime on this planet. He knows who he is, but once he gets there, everybody around him recognizes him as someone else, and every indication that he has that he's the captain of a starship is kind of laughed off. Well, you know, you've had this fever for a few days, so we think it probably will take you a little time to get oriented. And the time goes on. He falls in love with the woman who says that she's his wife, and the neighbors, they become to know, and he's had children, and the local politicians know him. And as the story goes on, they find that there is a disaster that is about to come to the planet, and there is, of course, the usual political maneuverings as if they are to do anything or not with it. And despite Picard's best efforts, he's not really able to affect any change. And finally, as his children are practically grown, they are going to launch a space probe. And he says, there's no point to it. Everything's past the tipping point. There's nothing to be done. And they said, well, the probe is a way that we can send our culture out, like a note in a bottle, in which we can find a way to maybe somebody else will receive this, keep our stories alive, keep our culture alive, by at least someone knowing about it. And it was that time that Picard starts to wake up on the Enterprise again and realizes that this entire lifetime only took really a few minutes. And he knew then what the probe was about, why they picked him, and it reminded him, and there was something written in the last pages of the script. However long it takes, the probe will find someone from another world, a leader and a teacher, to experience our culture. Through you, the word of the Catan will live on. We didn't have the means to save our people from this dying planet, but we found a way to preserve our history, our customs, what we meant to each other. The Elaine who knew things lived a long time ago, but what you thought of me and felt and did were all as real to you as if I had been here. Promise that you'll tell the world who we are and remember what we meant to you. Inside each of us lives an entire civilization. Then the captain wakes up on the Enterprise, knows that the flute that he'd learned to play during his lifetime on this planet was in the probe and had it beamed aboard. And near the end, he is playing the flute. It's a very touching episode, and in my opinion and the opinions of others, my wife too, it is probably the best that TNG has ever done. And so it was with great pleasure that I was able to meet Morgan Gendel and get a copy of the script. Now, this was the writer's draft. It was not the shooting script, and there were some changes that were made in it. First and foremost was the locations. Because of the cost of filming the series, they weren't able to do things like when Picard was hit by the probe, they were supposed to take him to sick bay. Well, because it would have been more costly and take more time to set up the lighting for the sick bay, they decided just to leave him on the bridge. And so everything that was supposed to happen in sick bay happened on the bridge. Everything that would have happened in the captain's ready room happened on the bridge. And so some minor lines were changed in order to accommodate this difference of location. Similarly, at the end where Picard wakes up, and in some of the scenes in there where things were a little bit more explained or were told a little more pictorially. But amazingly, most of what was in this script was shot, and it is a beautiful script just to read, not only to see it. Makes me want to go back to Star Trek The Next Generation and look for the inner light and kind of read the script along with it. I've done that before, but it's been a while. It is a treasured possession that I have now, a nice memory that I had of the conversation with Morgan Gendel, and I hope that you enjoyed my story too. So, if you will please, why not go and click subscribe if you'd like to continue to follow this channel. Also hit the notification bell so that when a new video comes out, you'll be able to see it. With that, thank you, and don't go far.